David, I've got a very, very serious business question for you. Do you braai?
Oh, loads. My first encounter with a British barbecue was interesting.
Welcome to the stream, an unscripted, unedited, free-flowing conversation with guests who reject the status quo with a bias for change in the world of water and beyond. My name is Tom Freyberg, an environmental journalist and content creator specializing in water.
And I'm Will Sarni, a water strategy consultant, doing my part to solve wicked water problems and also advance the take-up of Hawaiian shirts.
Thank you, Will. And we're delighted to welcome our guest today, who is David Grant, Director of Water Stewardship for PepsiCo. David, welcome to the stream and good to see you coming today from South Africa. So welcome to the stream. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm good. Hey, it's a bit chilly here out in South Africa, unlike what's going on in your neck of the woods in mid-winter. But I still managed to sport my Hawaiian shirt in the theme of the stream. So
I like it. You've even got the bike, the kind of the Will Sarni bike behind you, and the Hawaiian shirt. I mean, and you guys have worked together many years ago, so that to me is a positive sign. He's still, you're still copying the guy.
Oh no! Wait a minute! Don't go there. David, I have to ask you: do you ever move that bike in the background?
Probably more frequently than you do yours, Will, to be fair. I notice you kind of strategically move yours like an inch to the left or the right every now and again. Mine moves on the road.
I believe you. You will find that my tires are in fact not dirty and that water bottle is still full.
We're not going to do a dust inspection to see which bike has been used the most. I don't think that's fair. But either way, I feel like I need some wheels or something here instead of just shrubbery because you guys are looking very active. So maybe for part two, I'll bring the bike in, I think.
Tom, I think that's your challenge.
That sounded a little Monty Python, shrubbery.
Shrubbery, a bit of greenery in the office, right? To bring it to life. Okay, well, David, loving the shirt, loving the bike. Thanks for joining us. So where to start, really? Because you spent some time in the UK, where you born in South Africa, right? A career in water stewardship, but you spent some time in the UK and then went back to South Africa. So tell us a little bit about that, almost that reverse pilgrimage, if you like. And it was in Woking, where you came to in the UK.
Wonderful Woking, yes. I started, let me start with my career rather. So started off in the oil and gas industry, and I was there for a very short time, probably about a year, I think 2 years, and then joined then SAB Miller in a sustainability role, and was in South Africa until around 2006 when I was transferred over to their head office in the UK, as you quickly pointed out, which was based in Woking, and spent a good time there. Interluded with a few secondments out. Switzerland was one of the great ones I went to, so it's a really great opportunity to work in our different divisions of SAB Miller. And then in 2016, AB InBev took over SAB Miller, and I was offered the opportunity then to return to South Africa to head up the sustainable development function for their Africa division, which I took up. So in 2017, I officially relocated here, and then worked there for 3 and a bit years, and then joined PepsiCo in May this year.
Okay, so still the dust is still settling at PepsiCo, and along that journey, you and Will actually collaborated on a book, right?
Indeed, a very good book.
And you have the scars.
No,
not the scars. The fond memories. The fond memories from working with Will.
David, a virtual hug. I love the product placement. Thank you.
Yeah, there we go. Tom, it was brutal though. I recall getting
say how it is, David.
In the morning from Will demanding where the next iteration of my bit of the work was, and he used to say "driver of note." So be a while before I do that again. It was a bit of an emotional experience, but it was good.
So how was it for you, Will? Let's hear your side of the story. Come on.
Well, you know, I would sign up to do a book with David any day of the week. So I think, you know, during our time together today, we should extract a commitment from David to do a follow-up. Right, David?
Can we get a signature via Zoom just to kind of cement this deal in place?
Just send a DocuSign.
I would be delighted. Actually, I recall that this book the thought, at least, of the book came together in Stockholm, didn't it? I recall that over a dinner.
So I remember it quite vividly, David. I feel like we're dating. This is like, you know, yeah. So it was pubology. It was that
That's it.
Beer pub. It was like an epic gastro pub, and I think we were having dinner with Stu Orr, and sort of roped him in. And he did the forward to the book, and then you and I, the two of us, did the heavy lift. So I think we need to go to another pub, and I will ply you with alcoholic beverages and get a commitment to do Water Stewardship and Business Value Part 2, or a revised edition. How's that?
Revised edition. Yeah.
Oh, David.
The world's moved on quite a bit since that.
I think that's a nice segue to move from the story of how you guys collaborated on the book. So I mean, so Water Stewardship, David, you've been involved across multiple companies. How do you see that changing and evolving, and really the definition, sort of as we see water scarcity increasing, perhaps resources dwindling? How have you seen that kind of quite broad term of water stewardship kind of changing?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, you know, when I first joined up in the sustainable development kind of function with S&P Miller, water stewardship then, or it wasn't even water stewardship, it was just basically water efficiency. It was, you know, how do we optimize our water usage? And it was, you know, mostly driven from partly a CSR type agenda, but also partly from a cost saving point of view. So even back then, I think particularly with the beverage industry, there was a recognition of the cost involved with water water usage within the facility. And then that kind of started progressing itself as water stress became a bit more felt and you know, more data became available. I think the corporates or the private sector per se started kind of evolving into to say, okay, what's out there? You know, we getting good within our fence line, but what other risks are facing us in terms of water getting to our facilities or the quality of water arriving at our facilities? And I think with the evolving of tools like the WWF Water Risk Filter and the WRI work, I think they became enabling tools for corporates to really start getting a lot more granular understanding in terms of what the water risks were. So that was kind of, to me, the next horizon, kind of saying, okay, we've got it not right, but we know what we need to do within the facility. Now we need to start understanding what's happening outside in terms of the broader environment. And that's when things, you know, when the whole, I guess, the partnership evolution came out in terms of the need to work in collaborative action. I still don't think we've got it quite right, but you know, it's that whole thing, understanding we need to do something out within the watershed or the catchment that we're getting our water from. I think where it's kind of starting to evolve to again now is moving towards that kind of, first of all, the context-based metrics, understanding exactly what's going on in your watershed and making sure that whatever you're doing is addressing that risk specifically. Kind of segueing into the kind of science-based targets, which is kind of the new horizon now, which I'm finding really interesting. Not least to say, you know, if you look at science-based targets for carbon, I wouldn't say they're straightforward, but the science is, it's really well researched, and it's companies know what they need to do. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the science-based water targets play out from a catchment point of view, just because of the pure complexity of it. It's not like a global goal you can set yourself. It's each watershed has to be analyzed in its uniqueness. And then, we start unraveling things like data availability and, fair usage and all these really interesting questions that are starting to come up. So, rather long-winded answer to your question, but you're kind of coming from a very inward focus water use efficiency to where we are now, which is kind of science-based targets, which is the next frontier, I think, for me.
David, perfect for version 2, the revised version of water stewardship and business value, of course. But it's interesting. I think to your point about moving towards science-based goals, it strikes me that while that would be helpful from an environmental impact perspective, water, the physical characteristics of water, scarcity and quality, it has the potential to fall either way short or ignore the social and spiritual dimensions of water. So how do you move towards rational thinking around goals, but also acknowledge that things like access to sanitation and hygiene and some of the more not soft but challenging dimensions of water are met as you craft a corporate water goal? What's your thinking around that?
So, I think with all of these tools, to be honest, whether it's the WW Water Riskfuls that we've got now or whatever tool comes about, it is a tool. And a tool needs to be put in context with a whole lot of other information needs that you need in order to arrive at what action you need to take. So to me, a science-based target will be part of the data that you need to analyze in terms of assessing what your company needs to do in a watershed. Along with that comes issues like water access and sanitation, water governance, and governance would not feature really in a science-based target. It kind of sits out there, but the advocacy work, how do you support small entrepreneurs? How do you bring the rest of the industry along with you? So it's all these kind of the advocacy and innovation bits and the social side of it that you need to add into that to create a whole picture.
Well, it has to be achieved through partnerships, right? Partnerships
100%.
plus the community-led approach is the only way to kind of that underpins water stewardship, right? Because you, like you say, you're going beyond your fence line. It's not only the community, but the supply chains for PepsiCo across the hundreds of products you offer are just enormous. So the only way to do that is through partnerships and collaboration. But where else do you sort of, because me and Will often talk about innovation, right? And the guests we bring on here are particularly innovators. So kind of where I'd like to move the conversation onto is how do you still achieve innovation of some of the startups that we've approached in the company, the scales you've worked for? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, David.
So, yeah, it's interesting. I think we are facing, we're talking about working in partnership, right? And I think the struggle that we have as large corporates as well, when we are implementing these partnerships and really complex programs on the ground, is there's a lot of gaps in terms of data, in terms of analysis, which I think these small startups can play a really strong role in, right? And they're there, and it's how do you bring them to the party? And AB InBev and Will's mentioned this as well. They've got the 100+ accelerator, which was a great example of that, where you bring in these startups who've got innovative solutions to help you address the problems that we face on the ground, right? I guess what we need to be careful about is how those small innovative companies are handled or managed into big corporates, because it can go wrong very quickly. Sometimes it's it's a great idea. Let's get some entrepreneurs in to solve a problem. But unless it's done in a very managed way, it can go completely the wrong way. So for me, it's first of all, the private sector needs to be very deliberate in terms of defining exactly what problem they want to address. So you've got the right entrepreneurs coming to you with the right ideas, firstly. Then secondly, I think it's also important that there is some sort of mentorship program for these entrepreneurs. So a lot of them don't understand how these corporates function. I mean, they are massive and they are complex. From the procurement side to the legal side to what goes on site, and base things like health and safety at a facility. There's a whole lot of bits and pieces that we need to bring to get these entrepreneurs aware of how to work with a corporate and how corporates work in their own rights, along with mentoring in terms of actual business mentoring. Get a coach so they can understand, developing their marketing pitch and their business case, etc. And then obviously we need to make sure that we can actually use whatever ideas coming to the table, that we're able to actually implement it. There's no point in having someone, and that's something that was one of the mistakes that I think we made very early on, is we had some great ideas, brought them in, but then when we looked at it, saying, well, we actually can't really figure out how we can actually apply this into one of the facilities, because the proposed idea is too small to fit into the size facility we've got. So it's also understanding, can they actually realistically fit in there? And I think the last thing for me, which is important as well, is being able to scale these guys, because what you don't want is having one small entrepreneur or innovator coming and 100% of his business lies with you. So, corporates have got a responsibility as well, in being able to use their networks to help grow these guys when they've got really great ideas.
I love that you talked about the soft side of innovation, and soft is probably not the right word, but, one of the hard lessons I've learned over the years is that while the technology is really interesting, it's everything else that matters more. What's the business strategy, the team, mentoring, for me, that's spot on. It's how do you help really smart entrepreneurs understand what it takes to work for a multinational that is, big, complicated, demanding, very clear about return on investment, and get them to a viable business that's making money and thriving, and most importantly, delivering value to, PepsiCo, AB InBev, whoever it may be.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty big time commitment. It's more than, in my view, you don't just write a check and say, okay, gang, go have a good time, and we'll see you. Yeah, it's, you're dedicating staff, which is a big deal, especially these days when everyone's overloaded.
Yeah, no, 100%. But it's also not. I mean, it's also not just lying on one person. So generally speaking, from what I've seen and experience, is that you would have a startup that's supported by a multitude of people. You've got someone in procurement who will help them with the contractual side in terms of pricing, payment terms, etc. You've got a legal person who comes in and helps a bit on something else. You've got the marketing guys who come in as well. So it's quite a multidisciplinary approach if you do it properly. And you probably got one person who's the kind of the overall mentor and takes the leadership in this. But it's important to bring these different functional areas in to support these guys.
I think it's about giving enough creative room and freedom to allow entrepreneurs and innovators to do their thing, because often many people have chosen that life because they want to escape from having too much bureaucracy and process that comes with a multinational. But at the same time, you're giving the broader shoulders of the multinational and that access, and like you say, the help from legal, the help from marketing, the help from procurement, to kind of that help when needed. So it's kind of hitting that fine line, right, between allowing enough creative freedom for innovators and entrepreneurs to do their thing, but give them the ecosystem they need when they're at the right time of development.
Hey, Tom, don't expect David to agree with your comment about, big company bureaucracy, okay?
It doesn't exist. It's right. Mythical, like the unicorn.
Process David, has been completely streamlined, David, in the organizations you've worked for.
Yeah, David, no amount of coaching, really. After what, 8-9 episodes, really.
It wasn't implied towards.
It was a hypothetical.
Or any of your previous employers, David. I promise you. But I think what it comes to, you've mentioned the people and the mentoring, and I wrote a piece recently about, the headline was to do with a major brewery company in Europe, about creating what they believe is going to be one of the most efficient breweries in the world. And interestingly, the consultant from Denmark, it's not a case of the technology. We know this is on reusing water for industrial process water. It wasn't on the tech side. It was on the innovation was on bringing together these different stakeholders, from the regulators through to the tech guys, through to the consultants, through to the everyone involved, to kind of agree and collaborate and move things forward. And that, to me, I think where there's an amazing opportunity for growth and development.
Yeah, 100%. It's quite interesting you mentioned that. So, I think throughout the beverage industry, whether it's looking at beer or soft drinks, one of the interesting things for me has always been that, in theory, most of these companies can get down to kind of a 1-to-1 ratio, a liter of water to a liter of product. But there's a consumer element that sits behind it. And when you talk about bringing different stakeholders together, I think the consumer is also really important in this play because, if you were offered a beer and you were told this beer's been made of treated wastewater, I mean, would you drink it? And it's evolving the consumer mind in terms of, water is this really precious resource, and we need to get a lot more better in terms of our mindset around how we use it. And it is just that, it's a mindset. There's
a long way to go in terms of reusing water as an ingredient, but obviously in terms of as a key part of an industrial process, from cooling, from cleaning, there's a lot of developments on that. But I know in terms of the ingredient side, that's a long way away. But if you're asking me and Will, I think we'd probably say yes, we would drink it.
Oh yeah, well, as they say, in particular in the American West, you're downstream from somebody. So it's just the nature of water. So David, are you seeing greater acceptance of treated water in consumer products? I mean, how has that shifted very much over the past 6-12 months? So that's a pretty clear no.
No, it's. I think there's still. I mean, as part of an ingredient, definitely not. I think and to be fair, I think there's a combination. To be honest, I think there's a combination of from a corporate point of view and a marketing point of view, being very wary of putting anything out there may imply that your product may be slightly inferior because it's using recycled water, for example. So that's definitely there. And then obviously on the consumer side as well, it's very much. I just don't think we're anywhere near that. Despite the fact, when you look at drinking water, I've seen varying stats from the UK or here in Southern Africa and Namibia, where water's been through a couple of kidneys a couple of times before gets to you. So it's not new, it's not novel. It happens all the time, and for yourself that you treat wastewater down to drinking water spec with no problem at all.
Right.
It's just the notion of where it originates from, essentially.
Sure. The experience of Singapore has been interesting and at least provides hope for me that through education and maybe even more importantly, proper branding, you can get over that stigma to, get consumers to accept it. Certainly in Singapore, it's a unique situation where, relatively small country with strong public policy initiatives around water. But I love what they did with, branding new water. And you compare that to what's happened in the American West, where, it's still branded as, toilet to tap or, showers to flowers. And, it's like, you're not going to get anywhere with that. So, yeah, I don't know. Interested in your take on whether the needle has moved, so to speak, or we're still struggling with that one.
I think we're still struggling with it, to be honest. I mean, if I look at PepsiCo, for example, with going into kind of circularity when it comes to water, I think, we've got some really, really great work and really upcoming great work looking at how we reuse water within the process, but not in product.
Sure.
So it's always very clear that anything but product, and for the right reasons right now. And I think it's going to take, I think it's probably a bit of a joint effort in the sense that it's going to take a bit of encouragement or demand from consumers, as well as, to your point, companies getting better at telling that story. I recall being involved in a study a couple of years ago where we were looking at this and just testing consumer sentiment around it. And when we depending on the language you use, was varying degrees of acceptability. As soon as you spoke about reusing wastewater, the kind of the guys we were talking to immediately associated that with sewage. So you kind of cleaning up sewage and now you're trying to give it to us, and why are you doing that? Versus if you're saying we're taking processed water and cleaning it up, it still didn't have great acceptance, but the acceptance was a lot better because that association with sewage is now taken away. So I think that, so to your point, the language that you use around it is incredibly important.
Yeah.
So largely the two are going to remain separate, right? So you have where you can have the circularity and the recycling on the process, not as an food ingredient, but as a key part of that industrial process, cleaning, cooling, and then you've got water from local watersheds, aquifers, as part of the ingredient within the food and drink you're producing. And I think that separation may stay for some time because, like you say, there's a few, you see the occasional kind of independent, small craft brewery company that are managing to do things around recycling of water as an ingredient. But again, that's a very different operation to the scale of PepsiCo, right? You can't really compare this apples and pears is not the same comparison.
Actually, and I'll be really interested to see how the sales are going. You see these things popping up every now and again, to your point, where a small craft brewer has done something like that. I'm genuinely interested to see how that then translates into sales. And is it a very niche market, which I'm assuming it is, or is it more widespread?
When I use the word story, I meant it in a positive way. Not that, this is just a story. It is, creating a compelling narrative that a consumer would be drawn to, the whole brand value, falling in love with brands, brands with purpose. I don't know. I still remain hopeful, but I really do appreciate how challenging that is. Maybe if we could just make progress on reusing water in the process within the four walls, that would be a huge leap forward in itself.
So that's just the thing, to be honest, is I think there's still a long way to go with just improving efficiency with the technology we've got at the moment. I still think there's a lot of gain opportunity, cost-saving opportunity, before we get down to that kind of let's reuse it in product discussion. But yeah, there's still a lot of gains to be had.
I mean, before we move on, I think it's interesting. Do you think that there is going to be the shift in consumer demand, not only to echo what you said, Will, to buy from companies with purpose that they believe in, but to buy more ethically sourced, environmentally friendly products? Because I did an interview with Mike Barry who's a former sustainability director of Marks and Spencer's, the guy behind Plan A, because there's no Plan B. Really great guy. And I asked him the same question. He said there's kind of they surveyed the top 10% of their consumers were like super green, like they buy the most, even if it costs more, like much more ethical, sustainably sourced products, do their homework. Then under that, you've got about another 25-30% who are kind of a lighter shade of green, that they don't want to be burdened by it, they don't want to pay more for it, but they're taking active interest. But he said he thinks the two of those will shift as we go on. So I think, do you think as consumers demand these changes, there'll be no choice but to accelerate? I'm just wondering if we'll be having this conversation 5 years from now, and there'll still be that separation between recycled water as an ingredient and as a process.
I have a rather strong point of view on that has been no shock. Yeah. Indulge me for 30 seconds. I think the pandemic has changed the game in that people are more in tune with buying products that align with their social values. So think about who are the companies out there that stepped up and worked hard to address the pandemic.
Right.
And I keep score. There are companies now that I will buy from that really stepped up, in terms of, their commitment to community, to, what's going on nationally, their workforce, who cared about their workforce. And one tiny little rant, I find this huge disconnect between a company that will praise their reduction in carbon emissions and then fires 3,000 workers via a tweet. So to me, you can't separate this out anymore. It's, what's the corporate behavior? Are you a brand with purpose? Do you really care? And I really believe there's a shift going on right now. So I'll keep my mouth shut now.
No, that's a valid point. I mean, Tom, going back to what you're saying now, I mean, I was reading a Nielsen report a little while ago, and looking at the shift in both consumer demand for greener products as well as general consumers wanting or demanding, depending which language you're looking at, that the companies they buy from have greener credentials. But I do think, going back to kind of the M&S example, is I think you do still have a portion of consumers who will espouse sustainability ambitions or desires, but when it comes to the actual purchasing decision on the day at the shelf, sometimes price still does trump, unfortunately, as much as we'd like to think it doesn't. But I think, on that point, I think there's also room for companies to provide consumers with a way to, I guess, contribute to sustainability. So what I mean by that is, if you look at climate change or water, or whatever the case may be, it's hellishly complicated. There's massive figures being thrown about, and I think it gets to a point where consumers are generally confused in terms of what they can realistically do to contribute towards climate change, contribute towards water. And I think if you're in a company who can offer a product that says, buy my product, because if you do, you're supporting, catchment rehabilitation, or you're supporting whatever the case may be, solar energy in low-income villages. I think you're offering a consumer a way to contribute indirectly, and I think that could be quite an interesting proposition as well, over and above just purely products who are doing good in their own right, cause related.
Yeah, I think kind of to touch upon what you were both saying, I think, Will, you're right. The pandemic has been a spotlight on company CEOs and a litmus test of morality and how they engage, communicate, and act. So I think certainly companies that I've bought from since are the ones that I agree have behaved in a more favourable way. And I think people will, as the kind of the economy becomes tighter, will be more cautious in who they're spending their money with. But just to change track a little bit, David, I've got a very, very serious business question for you. Do you braai?
Oh, loads. It's
the only reason I say that is because it's in my head to ask you, talking about woking, is only because I complete change in tack. I know this is kind of what we do on the stream. We will come back to water stewardship eventually, but I think it's worth addressing you, our first South African guest on the show. Is I had a friend who came to an annual barbecue on the Green, and he was almost kind of looked at the way us British barbecue, you know, with it's in the rain, burning sausages and burgers, and he said, okay, I'm going to take over. And he literally bought a whole collection of marinades. He had temperature zones on the barbecue. He had a tool belt with different kits and thermometers. This guy was a seasoned professional, and I learned quite a lot from him. But he said, we do it, this is kind of almost like a religion in South Africa, because you have a more favorable climate. And so I just thought, when we had you on, I thought, I've got to ask this guy about the braai. And it's good. So I take it from your reaction, this is something that's close to you. And it does link to food and beverage in a way, so it's not completely...
No, that's fair. No, I mean, my first encounter with a British barbecue was interesting.
Please enlighten us.
And it did involve a couple of pork sausages and hamburgers and what resembled chicken in varying stages of burntness, versus typical South African braai, which probably involves half a cow at least, and a couple of other things. But yeah, it is definitely a kind of a very ingrained cultural way of doing outdoor cooking, put it that way. Actually, I recall the first braai I did in the UK was in the snow, and I recall sitting under an umbrella with the snow falling around,
with hailstorms around you, and
absolutely can't stop the tradition.
But the braai, it's natural cooking, right? There's no gas stoves involved. It's all charcoal, wood, or you can braai with fully automated, all singing, all dancing gas number as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's evolving. The purists will tell you that you can only use wood, right?
So these are the pure braai. These are like the
hardcore guys. Then you get the kind of the more liberals who will then kind of venture into charcoal or briquettes, and then you got a couple of guys venturing into gas, which is I still think is pretty much frowned on in South Africa.
I can imagine this hardcore circle of like the charcoal wood guys, and then Mr. Gas comes along and he's kind of not welcome in the circle anymore. Right? It's frowned upon. This guy's cheating at the braai.
Gas? No, you can't do it with gas. It's just not.
Will, are you a briquette sort of guy, or are you a...
Well,
I'm going to curse and say the gas type of guy. David, might not like it.
So I live in a condo without a balcony. So, I dare not start a grill in my dining room or kitchen. But when I did own a house, it was a Weber kettle with, charcoal briquettes.
There we go.
And when my sons were at the appropriate age, they would liberally use, starter fluid, which almost set the neighborhood on fire. But that's sort of my journey, if you will, in the world of barbecuing. I love barbecuing, but it's just not going to happen in a condo.
Tom, are you a gas man?
No, I've got a portable Weber that it's kind of folds up and you can take it on the beach, but then use some briquettes in there. No lighter fluid, just fire lighters. But we tried to do one the other night in typical British way. The clouds came over and it was blowing at like almost a gale force wind. And so I got my two daughters, probably not the best health and safety, to stand around and try and create some kind of windshield so we could get this thing lit. But I did. I persevered, and I thought, I'm not going to give up. And we managed to. I didn't burn the burgers and sausages that may be accustomed with British barbecuing. So, but
well done.
Yeah.
Tom, I think we're probably going to get a flood of comments about you using your daughters as a windbreak.
Yeah.
They were 2 meters away, socially distanced from the crowd.
All right.
Totally, all legitimately done.
All right. So viewers, you know, it's okay.
In fact, we had a team effort to kind of build up a wall of stones around the barbecue. So that was mainly their use. Should anyone be worried? And both daughters are okay. Thanks for the concern, Will. But probably wise that we pointed that out as well. I think. You know,
I think this is working out on the stream. I'd hate to see you pulled by some regulatory body in the UK for
I know, barbecuing and anyway, that was the slight diversion away to barbecuing. So guys, please feel free to find a segue to bring us back on track.
It's funny you bring up alternative hydration, Tom. I've got both of you look at me like, where is this guy going to go?
Okay.
So, David, I'm really interested in what Pepsi did with Sodastream. So a move from, not a move away from bottled water, but diversifying the hydration alternatives available for people, both in the home and outside the home. And I think the opportunity for in-home hydration through a Sodastream product offering is really interesting. And the thread that I go back to is talking about the intersection of corporate water strategy very broadly and innovation in products. So, I mean, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the cases that, companies like PepsiCo are continually evolving what their customer offering is, right? And so like Sodastream obviously offers a lot of convenience and customization for PepsiCo's customers. So that's kind of the area. The direction that went into. I would love to say there was a water player in there. I very much doubt there was. But it does pose an interesting question in terms of, for example, corporate water usage, where you effectively moving that from the facility to your customer,
right?
Which is a very interesting play.
Yeah, I thought it was an innovative move in terms of, I sort of have a large tent view of corporate water strategy, and I put alternative hydration under there also for, a variety of reasons, environmental, but also, health and wellness and traceability and, just the ability of technology to personalize, customize, what we drink and when we drink. So I don't know. I
think that's going to, I think in the next couple of years, I think as water scarcity, water stress starts ratcheting up in sync with climate change, I think you're going to see a lot more kind of innovation in that area in terms of, particularly in water stressed areas, in terms of, how do companies deliver products with very low water footprints.
Right. Yeah, that's exciting. I think that's an exciting business opportunity and one that has significant environmental and social value.
Again, I think, Will, it comes back to what we said before in terms of, democratized access to data and water, and giving people the power to kind of find out from a point of use perspective, find out what's in the water and have more choice on when they consume it. Different stages. So I think there's going to be more developments on that, and having done some work in kind of the Chinese and Southeast Asian market, there's the point of view systems almost become a fashionable item in the home that you show off, almost like we would invest into a coffee machine. So I think there's going to be more development into that in terms of a point of use and empowering people as well moving forward.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the word data there, and I'm going to kind of take in a slight tangent here. I mean, what I'd be really interested in from your guys' opinion is, so one of the things that I'm noticing is the availability of water data is scant, particularly if you look at, for example, groundwater, etc. And I find it quite remarkable in the sense that if you consider how water resources touches everything that we do, right? And it's reflected in the Sustainable Development Goals. You see how Goal 6 kind of touches every single other goal there, whether it's economic development, social development, you name it, water is integral to that. Then you look at the amount of science resource put behind climate change versus water, and they're eons apart. And I'm genuinely surprised by that, given how important water is for everything, and yet it seems to be the most underinvested, misunderstood resource out.
I agree with you 1,000%. I think it's again a big market opportunity out there. You know, for me, it's we've got these large disconnected databases. You know, I'll speak from the U.S. perspective. You know, federal, state, regional databases that are not accessible to the layperson or, you know, any stakeholder easily, not connected, you know, not aggregated, and most importantly, not translated into actionable information. So, you know, one of the things that I focus on is how do we democratize access to data and actionable information to the consumer, to, you know, an NGO, and start to make better decisions, better public policy decisions, certainly with the data we have, and also use that as a basis for collecting additional data. And it's, you know, to me, I agree with you, David. I think it's appalling, inconceivable, mind-boggling that really the most precious resource we have is not well understood. Not that it's not well understood, but
was undervalued and under. Yeah, I think misunderstood is a good word. I mean, I shared something the other day about BlackRock Institute saying that basically drawing attention to water and saying companies that have access to an abundant supply of water will be much more valuable in the future, and basically warned all other investors that water scarcity is coming to bite right now. And I think the investment institute of that scale laying out that claim definitely grabs some attention. But Will, I know we have to you have to jump off for another call, so let's try and wrap things up here. David, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thanks for your time, and hopefully you're using the bike straight away after this.
No, absolutely, yeah. So no doubt about that. I'm going to go on the bike and think about what we're going to put in the next book.
All right, awesome. So David, I love that we're going to do a revision to the book. Can you hold it up again, just for one last product placement?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And awesome, riveting. We're both getting rich on royalties, right?
Definitely not.
I will make a commitment to get out and ride the bike before I'm back on again. Got to figure out how to prove that to everyone, but David, you in particular, I promise I won't just move it. I will use the damn thing.
I think video footage will. We need some hardcore evidence here. Not that we don't believe you, but I think maybe a GoPro on the bike, just to show us some mileage and
shot of me riding and
tag it on Strava, that type of thing. There's various ways we can.
That would be a good idea. Just
all right. I'm in, guys.
Well, not in your biking outfit though.
Well, David, Will, thank you. Well, everyone stay tuned, because the next episode we're continuing the theme of water stewardship in food and beverage companies, and we have Andre Fourie, who is the Global Director for Water Sustainability at AB InBev, on as our next guest. So, Will, David, thanks for your time. All the best, and we'll speak to you soon.